Welcome to the Joyful Mate podcast. Join your joyful journey mentor, Anthony Harcher, as we explore the path to inner joy and fulfillment. Each episode, we dive into the science of happiness, share personal insights, and invite you to be part of this interactive book writing adventure. You'll hear from experts in the field of joy, happiness, and fulfillment who will share their wisdom and experiences. Let's embark on this journey together. Let's make happiness part of your everyday. Welcome on the Joyful Mate podcast. Awkward, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a couple of years since I've spoken to you, so I'm really excited to be on this podcast and talk to you about mental health issues and just joy and happiness.
Yeah, like last time we were, I guess, together was when you were studying neuroscience, and since then obviously you've ticked a few more boxes and now you're a graduate. So tell us a bit about postgraduate life and what you're into from a mental health perspective.
Right. So it's been weird, being a student your whole life and then transitioning to pretty much a 9 to 5 it takes some getting used to. I can't say that I'm fully used to it just yet, but it's been fun. I'm still learning. I think the learning really starts right now, with everything going on. So I think I've been lucky enough to have a job still, which, with the market right now in the US, it's been really bad, but still learning, still figuring stuff out. So it's been great.
And what is it that fascinates you about neuroscience? Because obviously you did the studies, so there would have been an attraction towards it. So I'm really keen to explore that curiosity about your mind and neuroscience.
Right. So I went for undergrad, so I did neuroscience and psychology both. And what really drew me into this field of study was just people. I love interacting with people. I love meeting new people, and basically understanding what makes you who you are was the main reason I got into this field. And it's anything related to like cognition, emotions, all of that is just, it's so exciting because it's so new and so, I guess, not explored. So there's so much to do with it as well. But the main reason I got into this field was just because I love people and, I just love understanding people better. Yeah, that was the main reason.
And throughout your studies and where you are today, have you been able to answer your question that led you into the curiosity?
The curiosity is there, but the answers, they're going to take a while. It's such a new field, and, people, as it's all subjective. Everyone's different. Everyone has their own set of values, own set of, behaviors and outlooks towards certain things. So it's like everyone's different. You can't really find an answer to who you are in that sense, or who people are in general. It's just a matter of curiosity and willingness to learn more. And I think that's the step I'm on right now, just being open to listening to other people's stories and, be a part of their lives and try and make a better change in that sense.
And have you come across any misconceptions or misunderstandings that you had in the lead up going into your studies that you now know, geez, that was totally missed the point on that, in terms of understanding who we are?
So I think I guess this is during undergrad, while I was taking certain classes, I'd be so stuck up on just one way of thinking and one set of like a prevailing ideology that made sense. But in reality, it's like we know so little about the brain right now as well that it's hard to just stick to that one idea and move forward with it when there's so much that's unknown. So I think the main thing that I've learned throughout, college and just like learning and studying this field is just not like there's so much unknown that you just have to be open to that idea of exploring more and more of it and trying to not think of it as a black and white kind of subject. It's more so like on a spectrum, like everything is. But, usually when you think of science, it's like science has one answer. But I think with neuroscience and psychology, it's very different in that we're still learning so much new stuff every year, like even every day probably. And it's just, you just have to be able to, be flexible on those situations and on those topics, I think. So the biggest thing I would... Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the biggest thing I would, say that's changed since I started studying neuroscience versus now is just the idea that we don't know enough to even really have a right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of learning and being open to that, I think, is the main thing.
Yeah, so it's very much leaving that black and white thinking behind and being still open and curious and wanting to continue to learn, like you said. And as you said, well, the answer's not known. It's still an evolving science, and even what we know today, in 10 years, we could then disprove it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very fascinating in that sense, but scary at the same time because, when you think of like a human brain, it's like it's the seat of everything. And the fact that we know so little about it is scary and exciting at the same time. So, it depends on your outlook towards it as well.
And what's the most fascinating concept have you come across in studying neuroscience and psychology?
That's a really good question. I think for me, and I guess this isn't really, it was just a fact that I learned like in my intro class where, there was this one clip I saw online where it was like, what if humans were able to utilize 100% of our brains? And basically what that means is if you're firing all of your neurons at the same time, that's basically a seizure, right? So it's like that kind of thinking isn't really possible in a way. Like you are using you're using the brain in your most effective and efficient way possible at all times pretty much. And that's the most interesting thing to me is how much your brain is able to respond to certain situations and still be the most effective that it can be.
Yes, and it really comes back to this adaptability piece that you shared earlier, how you've got this very open mind, a very willing to learn mind and adapting to the evolution of science, right? And that
Right.
continual learning. And I think, this is where a lot of people struggle with is they think they know, and then they look for evidence to support their
Right.
knowing, and they get stuck. And so this curiosity that you have, is it a learnt skill or is it something that you've just had innate within you from the very beginning?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I grew up really curious about, how things are, why they are. And going back to your point about, once people have an idea what something should be, they kind of find evidence to back it up. I've been the same way before, right? Like everyone has, I think, to a certain extent where it's like, it's the most comfortable situation for you to be in. So you're finding those things that you can prove. But at the same time, I think, just learning about the brain and just psychology and all of that, I think it's just a learned skill now. It's something I've kind of, even 2 years ago, I would say I was in that kind of mindset where, if I saw something that, even remotely I could attribute to my life, I would try and find things to make sure that that's how it is. But in reality, like, it is just not how to look at it, I think. And I think I've gotten better with, adapting in that sense as well over the years. So I would say it's a little bit of both, but more so a learned skill right now.
And I think there's like particular, when you read the media, the general media, there's certain generations that have a view of Gen Z, which is like, judging and quite fixated in their thoughts about Gen Z. And it's really interesting because when you talk to Gen Z, they're super open, they're super curious,
Right.
and they're wanting to connect more. And then you're thinking, well, this societal, I can't really say societal, it's certainly some generational view of Gen Zs is that they're not resilient,
Right.
they're too soft and all this. And then you look at their thinking and then you're thinking, well, you've got a very closed mind to like, have you actually spoken to someone from Gen Z?
Right.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this? Given you're in that generation or around that generation, they talk a lot about Gen Z and mental health. Just share it from your perspective.
I think, it's I can understand their viewpoint just because, when you've spent all your life thinking a certain way, it's hard to kind of adapt and change to a completely different type of thinking, right? Because like even a couple generations before me, like mental health mainly it was never really talked about, and I think a lot of people would internalize it and without having any real reason or, anything to understand what they were going through. And so for them, it was like, I just toughed it out. Why can't you do the same? And it's completely understandable that some people think that way, but I think the main thing is, as you mentioned, right? It's like once you start talking to people and understanding their perspective, their viewpoint, it really changes how you think of the world in general as well, right? It's a completely different sort of mindset, completely different sort of perspective. And I think everyone just kind of has to have that willingness to listen and understand another person regardless of their age, gender, whatever it is. I think the best knowledge you can get is from listening to a person and understanding their viewpoint, you know. So I
Uh,
think, sorry, I was just gonna say, so I think like going back to the, how Gen Z is viewed right now, like to a certain extent, I can understand that viewpoint, but at the same time, if you take a little bit more time to really delve deeper into it, it's much, much more complex than just a surface level conversation.
Yeah, it's true. I think like my interactions with Gen Z is they're, like you, curious, open, and they want to explore, they want to connect, and it's all that is very supportive of good mental health. So
Right,
like as you mentioned, previous generations would just suppress their feelings and not let anyone know that they're struggling from, within, and they're not coping. And whereas, Gen Z will openly talk about it, and in that openness about it, then it allows people to come in to help them or support them. And so for me, your generation is super adaptable, and I think that's more important than being resilient, because for me, like, resilience is you get knocked down, you get up again, right? But you can do that so many times, but if you keep getting knocked down by the same thing, eventually you're going to struggle to get up, right? You're just going to think, well, I can't be
right,
bothered anymore, this is too hard, and you get depressed and you just give up. Whereas your generation is saying, okay, I get knocked down a few times, but what is it? Why? And because I'm
hmm,
curious, why do I keep getting knocked down? And because of that curiosity, you can actually find the answer, find or pathway
right,
around it or through it, or and you can. So I what I really like about Gen Z is this adaptive thinking, which is more important to me than resilient thinking,
hmm,
because you can find solutions and actually move forward. Whereas, for me, the resilience is sort of that tough it out mentality,
right,
just keep bouncing back, keep getting up, but not sort of asking, why do I keep falling down? How could I?
exactly.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
what what would you like? Yeah, what would you like to share on that?
I think it's, as people, why is really the closest, like I think mental health issues really show the complexity in different ways of thinking in a way as well, because everyone's going through something else, something different that you're not aware of. And I think our openness to communicate with one another and be there for someone else really shows that it's more of a community thing, and it's not, you're not just alone in what you're doing and what you're going through. And I think oftentimes, with mental health, that's the biggest thing, is you feel so alone, right? So it's like knowing that there's a community that backs you up and that there's other people that might be going through similar situations, it kind of gives you a ray of light in a way. It's kind of like, it gives you hope, it shows you that you can get better from it. It doesn't have to be the end goal. You can change the way you think just based off of how other people have tackled different situations, and our willingness to talk about it just shows that you're not alone. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with mental health issues right now in today's world, I think.
And you really touch on a great point, is this point of connection, right? It's sort of like, by me opening up, I'm able to connect with a broader community or other people that are, also either have gone through this or are going through this. And,
Right.
if they're going through it, we can go through it together, like as a team. If,
Yeah.
if someone's been through it, what can I learn off them? What are some potential ways through this? And that then brings me back to social media, right? Because there's
Right.
also this view of social media is the devil, it's evil, it's so bad for our
Right.
mental health. But if I look at it from what you're sharing around, connection, and then I see, well, it's not necessarily the evil or devil. Again, that's a perspective, or,
Right.
yeah. So please, from your perspective, a Gen Z, neuroscientist, psychologist, how do you see social media?
So, I mean, it's as you mentioned, right? It's how you look at it. I would say it's a little bit of both. You can always find good stuff, good things on social media, but at the same time, there's a lot of bad things on social media as well, right? And I think depending on what content you consume, social media can be either the best thing for you or the worst thing. So, for example, like if you're just like the term doom scrolling, right? It's like if you're just kind of keep scrolling with no kind of intention or no meaning, it can get, it's like the instant gratification, right? And that's not something you're technically gaining anything from. But I think if you cater social media to what you want it to produce for you, it can really be a good thing. But again, it just depends. I would personally say that there might be a little more negative than positive to social media at certain times, but at the same time, it's the connectability, right? It's like how connected you are to other people, and just that, if I'm missing a friend, I could just go text him right now, and I'll be able to talk to him or talk to them, whatever. And it does wonders in that way. But there are, of course, as I mentioned, the negative aspects to it. But again, I think if you utilize it correctly, it can be the greatest thing that you can learn from and gain something out of.
How is it that you use it?
I try not to use it as much, to be honest. I think the main thing I look at social media for is just being able to talk to people and being connected with one another. I try to use it to, like maybe learn something like from a neuroscience perspective or like a psychology perspective, following some accounts that, have that, snippets of what something might be. But I mean, there are, of course, like other times it's for memes and, stuff like that isn't technically, I'm not really learning something out of it, but it gives me that instant, joy and happiness at the moment that sometimes you need. So I think I think it just depends on the day for me, really. I can go from using it for like good things and then just go doom scroll for a couple hours and then not get anything out of it, So it's a spectrum, it's never just one or the other. So yeah, I think it just depends on the day for me.
And you're obviously on the Joyful Mate podcast, so I have to ask you this question: is what is joy and happiness to you?
Right. So, it's funny because leading up to the podcast, I tried to do a lot of research to, try and understand the concept a little better from like a neuroscience perspective, a psychology perspective. But as I was doing the research, I think I started overcomplicating it. In my head, I started thinking of different things that I could say and I could do, but I think really joy and happiness is all about the little things. It's like doing like breathing exercises, for example, or enjoying a glass of wine with a friend, or even going out for a walk. I think it's people tend to ignore the little things in your day that really make up how you feel in the moment, and it's important to, for me right now, it's important to kind of redirect your attention to those little things and really try and make the most of it. So for me, I would say joy and happiness really is just the little things that people tend to overlook. And which makes sense, right? Because the one negative thing will always take up more space in your mind than the positives, right? So I think it's essential to really have those little things kind of sum up day by day and just have that as your motivation as well. So I would say that's kind of my way of thinking of it right now, is just not to really overcomplicate it, but just keep it simple, have a decent outlook towards it and just enjoy it. Well, enjoy the little things,
I think you really touched on a really key point, is that we often overcomplicate whatever it is we're doing, or we overcomplicate like the solution to a health problem, when I found it's just the basics and getting back to the foundations. And like you've touched on so many of the foundations, such as connection, right? Just connecting with one another. And we take that for granted. But it's as you said, a wine with a friend, but then we will think that's a catastrophe because we've had a wine. You get what I mean?
Whereas, right, exactly.
And like often I'll talk to clients and they will share with me, oh, I was so bad last night. I had, I was eating dessert, and I said, please share a bit more around the context of you having the dessert. Went out with a friend and and I was thinking, wow, we get so myopic and think, I had so many calories and all this. And I'm thinking, look at the bigger picture. Sometimes we just need to zoom out in order to see that bigger picture.
Hmm.
As you said, like there's a spectrum. We can see that spectrum if we take a broader lens, but or we can
Right.
take a very myopic view of the spectrum and think everything's doomsday, right? It's all doom and
Right.
gloom. Trump's tariffs, like so.
Yeah,
Um,
it's crazy.
but the other, and I read this too, but I thought it was interesting is, there was a financial commentator on Trump's tariffs because it's causing financial upheaval, and they said, well, take a 5-year view of the markets. Trump won't be in 5 years, and it's so true. If we actually take a bigger perspective of the current situation, it becomes so small. Like in a sense that
Right.
we won't even be talking tariffs once Trump leaves. You get what I mean? Like it'll be just the thing. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now I just want to circle back to your research and what was profound in you looking into the joy and happiness research that sort of stood out to you? I mean, obviously you have had that insight around it's quite simple.
Right.
Beyond that, what have you found?
I think, and this it doesn't just come from the research that I was doing, but also just active applications of it. But positive thinking is something that, it's really important because it has physiological changes in the body, right? So it's the way you think affects how you behave, and the way you behave affects how you think, right? So I think the main thing that, and it's of course it's easier said than done, right? Like I can say that, oh, just think positively, but at the same time, it's essential to try and have that outlook, just because like for okay, I guess let me back up a little bit. I read this article where it was talking about placebo, and there was this one doctor who did like 10 surgeries, but 5 of them were basically like a sham surgery. They didn't actually do anything, and it was treating arthritis in the knee. And what they found was 6 months later, like all 10 of them, they were all given prescription drugs, all of that, everything that you should be doing post surgery. And all 10 of them reported an alleviation of symptoms, right? So it's like them thinking that their body is getting better is physically changing their body to actually get better. And I think that applies to mental health, that applies to how you look at things, just kind of tweaking the way you think and how you think can really affect your everyday life, and just change your outlook on a lot of things. Like for example, for me, I started doing like the Wim Hof breathing technique
Hey,
recently,
yeah.
and it's honestly like the first couple of days I was like, okay, it's maybe a placebo, right? It's working, but it might just be in my head. But now I try to do it at least a couple times a day, just to feel those alleviation of like symptoms in terms of overthinking. And because I'm prone to overthink quite a bit, and it's just I'm starting to realize that those little things that I do just really help with preventing that and kind of getting my baseline levels back down. So yeah, I think it's just your outlook on things really affects everything, really. Your behavior, consequences, all of that. And
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy as well, right? It's like all of CBT is pretty much trying to suppress the negative feelings and negative thoughts, and being more positive about your outlook on things, and how you can actively use that positivity and change your day to day. And I think it's a very essential skill to learn and to have.
And what else do you do besides the Wim Hof breathing to support your, mental
Right.
health? Joy?
I for the longest time I stopped doing physical exercise, and I've been doing that like more of a routine now, and that's been nice. It gives those release of endorphins, those feel good chemicals, release of dopamine, serotonin, all of that. So physical exercise for sure, meditation, mindfulness. And also I think the other thing that I do is I really try to be very introspective. So understand the emotions that I'm feeling, and understand why I'm feeling those emotions, and what aligns with my values and what doesn't. Because I think the main thing is you're most happy when your actions align with your values, right? So it's important to really take that time of your day to understand who you are and why you feel a certain way if something goes wrong. So I think just little things like that, maybe going for a walk, or you know getting some sunlight, even, like all of those are very essential things that I'm starting to take like I'm giving more importance to now.
It's incredible how you touched on like such a simple practice, just that reflection. Like, and you look at the modern world, it's so busy doing, right? It's just, like, and
Right.
often people would say, if like you say, well, one thing that would help you is to pause and reflect. I don't have time for that.
Right. It's like 5, 10 minutes, it really isn't much. But I think the world's going by way too fast, and people, I think, need to really just take it a little slowly, take it day by day instead of taking it, as a everything all at once. You need to be able to, I think, internalize as well as externalize, and they're both very important.
And it's very, very important that you have that reflection, because if you understand yourself, then you can understand better how you're interacting with the world and actually understand others better as a result of understanding who you are and the way you behave. And so, you've really touched on a key, simple practice that everyone can do on a daily or throughout the day, is just that reflection as to, okay, I'm not feeling great, but ask yourself why. Like, rather than just go and, as you said, go and, seek some immediate gratification through doom scrolling or something like that.
Right.
Just sit with it and say, what's triggered this feeling within me? Why do I feel this way? And that will start revealing some answers in time. And I think too often we just sugarcoat it, or we suppress it and just move too quickly on, as opposed to really sitting with it. And as you said, ask yourself, why am I feeling this way, and get to a better understanding. And
Right.
and then what can you do about it? Maybe I need a bit of help here. So yeah, I really like that practice that you shared in terms of reflection, because I think it's simple. It doesn't cost anything, and it really starts to, and to your earlier point, is you start to get to a better understanding of yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Through this reflective practice.
Right. And I mean, again, it's easier said than done. Like, I think very recently I've started to, really understand the importance of all of this. And I think it's especially when you're kind of caught up in the routine of a day to day, like the 9 to 5, and, having that routine. I think it's important to take a step back and really just understand, either yourself, the people around you, just think a little bit. So I think it's practice, but it's definitely learned practice.
Well, yeah, and it just takes that constant application. And I think one thing that you mentioned around the values, like if you're feeling a bit down and not fulfilled, then maybe you're doing things that aren't important to you. And then you find that connection, and then you think, I just got to get back to priorities, just got to get back to what's more important to me. But if you don't ask yourself that question or take the time out, then you won't find that answer, and you'll just keep doing the same thing in autopilot.
Right.
I like how you really start to do this reflection, because we can start to better understand ourselves and what makes us who we are, and how we can, I guess, be more fulfilled in essence. Yeah.
And I mean, in terms of happiness, there's so many different types of happiness that you can kind of attain. There's the fulfillment aspect, where you need that meaning to really get that gratification. But there's also sensory pleasures, like, and I think if you look hard enough, there's always going to be something that can help you with that. There's always something that you can do, like little things that kind of make it into a bigger picture. So I think it's important to realize that fulfillment is not the only aspect of happiness, but there's so many different things that you can do on a daily basis to still feel that and work with that as a booster.
As you said, like, you've got the Wim Hof breathing technique now. You also have introduced exercise. You mentioned sunshine. So there's So I really appreciate you putting aside the time. I know it's late for you over there in Boston. So thank you for coming on and sharing your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. This was a great chat.
Awesome. No, I've really enjoyed reconnecting and just finding out where you're at. And there's no doubt there's listeners that have really resonated with your message, and you're, obviously learning and going on a journey. I'm sure there's people that want to follow you and connect with you. So how can the listeners, viewers best connect with you?
I mean, Honestly, LinkedIn, like social media, Instagram, all of that, it's the same handle. It's just my name. So Akibatarwala. And yeah, I mean, I'd love to be open to talking to anyone and, just learning more about people and just hoping this can help,
Absolutely. No, there's been some gems and great insights that you shared today. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time and great reconnecting. Another,
Amazing reconnecting.
yeah.
Yes. It was
And
great to
yeah,
see you.
for the listeners and viewers, please share this with others that you believe that could really benefit with Awkward's insights around mental health, the simple things, the just his perspective. That sometimes that can be what's undoing us is the way we see things, and maybe we need to look at it from a different lens. And
Right.
when we start to look at things from a different lens, we can start to better understand other people and why they do what they do. So I really appreciate the listeners to tune in every week. So please share it with others, and please reach out to Awkward and follow his journey on becoming a expert in this field of neuroscience and psychology.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing.
awesome. No, thank you.